Yo, this is OG Drew. Don't miss my episode on classic burners. Bam!
Welcome to Classic Burners. Here we are with Silver Lake's OG Drew from the Los Angeles area, Silver Lake area of Los Angeles. One of the elders in the game, and very relevant to today. Right now is working on great designs, stickers. He's out there painting and very active still for in the Los Angeles culture out of the the original guys. And so, thank you, Drew. Welcome.
Thank you. What's respects. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, let's get right into it because we have a lot of cool stuff to cover. We're going to get into the origins and everything. Now, your unique perspective, let's going to like some of your formative years, you come from a Cuban background. And so me as a kid remembers, many Cubans that were had businesses and were, pretty prolific people in the communities of like Glendale, Silver Lake, Hollywood, all those areas. So you got a firsthand experience to see what that was like. So just out of curiosity and for our viewers, if you could just kind of run us through a little bit of generally about that,
Well, my family, being of hardworking immigrants, came here from Cuba, and we predominantly, what we did is we stood in that area, the Silver Lake area, when we first got here. And one of the most fascinating things to this day is that my father got here and in 1972, and in 1978 he already bought his first house. So that's a goal for me, like to see that. And that was one of my inspirations till this day, is to look at like how somebody migrated from another country, came here with nothing, and in 5 years bought his first house. So to me, living in that community and having the structure that my dad had, and basically the influence of him being a hard worker, has basically given me the insight and the way that I live today.
What are some of the things that like a Cuban American in Los Angeles, like some of the places that were famous that they would eat, or was there anything like where they would maybe gather or anything like that?
Well, there was always these different places where it was basically that my dad would go and eat, and then we would go eat there. And when we went there, my dad was basically a good person with a good heart, and had, a lot of friends that basically respected him for being a hard worker and being a good man. That when we went there, he was always open armed, and it showed me like this is my dad, and the integrity, and not only that, but the character that he had in the community. So I looked at that, and it was influential in my life also growing up.
Wow, much respect to your dad for establishing like that good example.
Most definitely. Thank
Okay,
you.
so taking from that example, a young Drew comes up as a teen in Los Angeles. So talk to me about your formative years in hip hop and graffiti and all that kind of stuff. How you got into it, as a young man.
I think more than anything, I'd have to start like where I was trying to find myself. You know what I mean? I went through different phases in my life. I tried skateboarding, and then I tried BMX. And then from there, I kind of like saw the dance culture come into effect. And that's when breakdancing was kind of like out in like 82, 83, in basically in my plain sight. And I gravitated towards that, and I started like getting influenced by it. And was more of a popper, and I went to Hollywood. I went to Venice Beach. I went to different places in LA, and we used to basically like the norm. We would take a linoleum or a cardboard, and we would do all that good stuff and have all that good times. And then we basically would take the bus to Hollywood, and we would pop and break dance in Hollywood. But then sooner or later, I started finding myself like getting a little better. And then there was an audition that was being held to join the LA Breakers.
An audition?
Yes, sir.
Where did they
And
hold it at?
they held it in the Pico Union District. And I remember me and my friend Dale, we showed up to it, and we walked out, we did our thing, and at that time I used to like doing tuts, and that's kind of like what my specialty was. To the name that I even had a name that was called Mystical Tut, and I auditioned, and they went back. My friend auditioned, they went back, and they came back out, and they said, "You made the team,"
Wow.
and that's when I formally was a member of LA Breakers.
Get Up Stickers is the ultimate bombing sticker. Made from military grade materials, these stickers are super easy to peel and were made for putting on tanks. So you know they're gonna last. So click on the link below to submit your designs. You don't want to sleep on this.
My friend Dale didn't make it, so that was a long bus ride home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he was happy for me. That was the main thing.
That's cool.
And from there, I started getting involved with the LA Breakers and going to a few shows. We went to World on Wheels. We went to a few places. We battled other crews, and it was a good time. It was a great time. But then all of a sudden, boom, graffiti was put in front of me. You know what I mean? And that's when I started seeing graffiti since an early age in that district right there in that area. It's infested with gangs, a lot of gangs around us. And so my first early experience of graffiti was a lot of the gang writing on the walls. And I was basically, I enjoyed looking at it. I loved it. I started seeing the different types of lettering, the styles, the block letters, the chunkies. And it kind of like lured me away. And then I started basically learning the art form of graffiti. And I remember to this day, the first time I wrote and I tagged my name, and that was in 1984. And I wrote something on the floor, and then all of a sudden I told my friend, "Hey, look what I drew." And that's where my name comes. He basically said, "That's a perfect name for you." And it was my friend Jez, rest in peace. And he gave me that name. And since that day, 84 till now, I still use the same name.
Cool. That's a really cool story. And then how did you find out about the more hip hop style of writing as opposed to the gang style? Because in the early days, you had some really cool like styles that were like more funky or hip hop type stuff. So how did you learn about that?
I think more than anything, in the beginning, when I was first starting and learning the format and the lettering, I gravitated towards like a lot of the gang writing. And then from there, all of a sudden, boom, Subway Art comes out. And here we are looking at this book, which basically would be one kid that would either rack it or one that basically bought it. And we would all like share those pages and look at it. And then we'd be like, damn, man. Like, then we would start like doing what basically most people do is use those letter forms and try to adapt it to our own style and make our own thing. And basically use our own letter form. But then from there, I started getting into like more coloring and stuff like that. And that's where the colors come in. And I think for a lot of people is like in our history of our Los Angeles gang culture and graffiti, which is still a moniker basically tagged on the wall, it was always just simple colors. It was either black, gray, blue, or red. And then when we started putting basically colors into it, it stood out. And it was like, oh shit, what is this? And that's where we kind of like evolved into our graffiti and then started having an identity.
Did you have a piece book back then?
Well, I had many piece books. And those, I wish I had them to this day, but a lot of them just basically being parents and being loved ones of mine, they would destroy them and say, this is the reason why you turned out and you ended up in this situation or that situation. So it was like it was the reason why I turned out eventually later on in life, the human being that I was.
Well, this is something that was experienced more by the first generation pioneer writers because there was nothing for parents or anyone to refer to. There was a huge generational gap because like hip hop pops out on the scene and it's this whole new thing that's never been dealt with before. So obviously the parents aren't good. They're going to think the worst things, you know?
Most definitely. And that to them was gang writing. That's what it looked like to them, that you were scribbling on walls.
They couldn't tell the difference.
They didn't know exactly what it was. They knew that you were doing not a form of art that was acceptable to them. It was more of vandalism and getting you in trouble, and then more like tagging on walls and being disrespectful to other people's properties and stuff like that. So they didn't want that. You know, they were trying to raise a good kid. They were trying to be stern and trying to be like a good influential person in our lives to teach us, you know, the morals and values of life. But we did what we did.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Which now goes on to you took it to another level, and I can personally testify to this that as I would take the one bus, that double worm that goes to downtown LA, you were one of the people I would see up everywhere, up and down Sunset, on billboards, on rooftops. You started really getting up a lot. Tell me about some of like your bombing adventures in those days.
Well, first of all, you had to basically like we didn't have any kind of income. So we had to go racking more than anything. So you get the rack, you take the paint, you bring it, and then you find a good location, a good spot. But I remember the rooftop that you're talking about. It was on top of Silver Lake and Sunset. It was on top of the Silver Sun. And I went up there and I did a piece up there. And that was during the time when I was one of the forefathers of LA's Top. And the crew started with a few of us, and it started at King Junior High. And then from there, I took it and I went up on the roof and I did that. I did a few billboards as a member of LA's Top, did a lot of tagging on the streets. And then the second time I came back is when I was OTR.
And I think that had to have been one of the first rooftop pieces, in my opinion. There's an image that was down the way that was the first chrome piece I've ever seen with the chrome looking fill-ins. But I don't know which one was first because they were both up when I ran into both of them. And that was 86. It quite possibly could be one of the first rooftops.
Well, that one was done in 84.
And I saw it in 86, but
and then in
it
85
had been there. Yeah.
is when I went up there and I did it with OTR again, right next to it.
Yeah, the blue one then. There was a red one and a blue one.
Yes. And I tried to do a character right there, Bon Bod or something
Bon
like that.
Baudet character, yeah.
I tried to do that. Came out okay. People, you know, they told me, yeah, wow, you do characters too, which was really not my thing. I was more of a bomber and a tagger. So piecing to me wasn't something that was huge. I just liked to bomb and tag. And from there, I started just basically hitting a lot of buses. That was my joy more than anything. I love to hit buses. I love to tag. I did the inside of the freeways.
Who did you run with on the buses? On bus tagging? Was there certain writers
there was a certain,
you hung out
we
with?
basically, you know what, and a lot of times we would just meet up on the buses. Then, of course, there was the writer's bench, which was that basically came after. But we had one before that was basically, one of them was in Sanborn, one of them was in Vermont, and that was the Triax family. And we would all meet up. It would be, at first, it'd be 6 or 7 of us. Then by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, there'd be 30, 40 of us. And then we just catch buses and go that way and come back this way, throwing out the bus passes out the window to get back on the other bus, jumping out the back window, getting on through the back door. Whatever it was basically for us to get mobile and just destroying the buses constantly.
Another part of that a memorable moment, right, was when you actually climbed up to a billboard on Sunset, and all the little writers from the writers' corners were yelling like, "Put me up, put me up!"
Yeah, that was at the writers' bench on Fairfax, at the Carl's Jr.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was there, and I remember being at the writers' bench right there in Fairfax, and we all hung out across the street, and then I saw a big billboard that still, I think to this day, I see it, and I'm like, get that, like, wow, like I remember climbing that. I wouldn't climb that today, and then going up there, and then all of a sudden everybody's looking down from the bottom and being like, that's Drew up there, what is he doing up there? Then all of a sudden everybody ran across the streets, started yelling names and screaming their names, and I'm just tagging away.
So then that was possibly the first billboard ever hit by a writer.
You know what? Before then, I already did a few billboards. I did one on Hyperion and Sunset, which was very shaky. It was very...
Is that Burrito King?
No, that's the one that's right down the street, right up the street from King Junior High, across the street
Okay.
from the McDonald's. And I did that one, and that was on a cold night, which was windy and it was shaking. And I ended up doing some block letters up there. And then before that, I did one in Glendale behind the AM/PM right there on Glendale Boulevard. I just, you know what, I like to push myself. And that Glendale one too, the helicopter came. I ended up going down the thing and ended up jumping on this roof. The roof caved in. I ended up running. I got away. You know what I mean? But during that time when I was a kid, that's what's crazy about it. Like when I look back at my rap sheet before it became like felonies and criminal history, and I pull that up now as an older gentleman, I pull it back, and I think during that time from like 84, 85 to like 87, I had like maybe at least 17 different misdemeanor vandalisms.
Yeah.
You know, because I pulled it out, and now my rap sheet, they say that it erases, but it doesn't erase. It's still there.
Yeah, I have
So
like 11. And
yeah.
that's because in those days I figured it out. It was the reason would get busted so much is because we were on foot.
Mm-hmm.
And the buses, they only ran so often. So if there was a call, you're probably the only guy walking like around there or in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And they would probably watch and follow. I know there were certain times they'd pop out on me. They'd been watching me for a while, whatever.
It was a different era then too, because there wasn't the same effect as far as everybody having a cell phone, but sooner or later they get to a phone and they report you and
Yeah.
tell on you. And just me being the height that I am and just walking with a backpack rattling away, just
Yeah.
talking, just basically walking
Ink
down
on
the
your
street.
hands.
Yeah, ink was everywhere. That was
Yeah.
predominantly, that's how we knew if you were a writer. If you didn't have ink on your pants, on your shoes, on your hands, then you basically, that would be one of the introductions for a lot of us. Like we would ask, like, what do you write? And then we would know right away. And it was so bad that we had to just keep dyeing our pants over and over again. If they started off gray, then we would go get the food dye or some kind of dye and dye it to make them blue. And then that would basically become black. And then it would just constantly, the shoes were filled with ink all the time. We predominantly use marsh ink to flood any pilot marker to the point that when we smashed that thing against the window of a bus, that it would just drip all over us and all over. The more drippier, the better. And not only that, but then we started getting our own erasers where we made our own markers and stuff like that, where we used the band roll-on, stuff an eraser in there, fill that thing up to the brim with ink, have that in your pocket, you just drench with ink, and then when you hit that bus, it was a splatter. And that was the thing. The more drip, the better.
I remember.
And yeah.
Okay, so on that billboard, when you're up there, you're climbing up there, and all the kids see you from the writers' bench, and then they get excited, and now they want to have their name up there too. So who was down there, and what were they having? Asking you to write?
You had Whis down there. You had Bruce. You had Cade. You had Dex. You had Reggie. You had Price, of course. A lot of the West Coast artist dudes. Some of the guys from my crew, OTR, were down there. Just a lot of different people that were down there. And then to top it off at the end of it all, I finally come down and there's Test. And he's like, bro, you didn't hit me up. And I'm like, damn. You know what I mean? So to this day, rest in peace, Test. But the thing is that he's like, man, I remember that day when you went up there and you didn't even hit me up. Because it was just going so fast with me being up there and you being so high.
Yeah.
Just hearing the names of the people that were just screaming out the names. It was just so hard. You know what I mean? And basically broad daylight. You know what I mean? We're not talking nighttime or nothing like that. We're talking about like 4 o'clock rush hour. You know what I mean? Up there, just on a white billboard, just hitting up a bunch of names, with a spray can.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the history of Marshall High, because in the Silver Lake area, Marshall High School was a place where let's go before Marshall High. Let's go to King about who were the writers you ran with and your transition into Marshall High and why Marshall High had so many writers.
Okay, well, back in the days when King Junior High, they used to park all the buses in the front of the school. And right when you get out of school, you'd be able to get on those buses right there. So during that time, when I was going to King, there was Odie, which is now Vote from OTR LOD. There was Price, there was Dex, there was Reg, there was Screen, there was Rescue, there was Bruce, there was Mice, just a bunch of us all in the school at the time. And basically, right when we got out of school, if we stayed in school long enough, because there was a notorious police officer that was there, his name was Porky. And those of you guys that know about King Junior High back in those days, he was a very heavy set older man, but he had wheels. You know what I mean? Like if you try to run from this dude, he would catch you. So either way, you try to jump over a fence to get out, or basically get out of the school in some way or somehow, he would chase you down. Okay. So right in front of the school was these buses. There was like either 6 or 7 buses that would park right in front of the school of King Junior High. And we would get on that bus. And from the moment we would get on it, we would start tagging up the bus and then go down, and then it would just make a left on Sunset and then go, and we'd be done. Yeah.
Okay, then you guys go into Marshall High, and now I imagine that gathered kids from other junior highs up into that school. So you had quite a vibrant writing culture there, right?
So then you get to basically, we end up the summer, and then from there you end up going to basically high school, which was in 10th grade back then, which was basically Marshall High School. So when we get there, and when we're there, we have predominantly all these areas. You have the Atwater, you have the Frogtown, you have all these different areas. You have the Silver Lake, the Hyperion, the Las Feliz. You have all these different writers that are coming into that school. And then what was a crazy thing about it is that we started hitting the hallways in the school. You know what I mean? Like where the lockers and all that were at. I finally ended up getting expelled from there and kicked out. And then from there, I ended up going to different high schools. I went to Belmont for like 2 days. And then from there, I went to continuation school in Newmark. Then I got kicked out of there, and then just constantly just moving around to the point that it became like you're kicked out of LA Unified School District. So then my dad pushing me and my family telling me, and probation officers, I was already in and out of juvenile hall, and them telling me you got to continue going to school. I finally ended up having to go to Glendale Unified School District. And then that's a whole nother world over there with the Glendale writers over there. And you start meeting the guys from over there. And on the back, I'm going back on the bus also, the 91, the 92, the 94, just taking that bus.
Who were some of the Glendale writers at the time?
At the time, I knew that they were there, but they were younger than me. There was basically like Precise was probably out there. I think Panic might have been out there. I just seen them on the way in, because Glendale High School is just another breed. You know what I mean? Like if you looked a certain way, you just stood out. You know, and that was when I was transforming from 86, 87. 87 is when I was basically, the gang culture was coming in hard.
Okay.
It was coming in hard, and it was hard to be a graffiti writer at that time, because the predominantly larger gangs that were out there, they were basically looking at us and saying, you know what, you guys are tagging way too much. You know what I mean? You guys got to be a part of us. And we never thought of that. We said to ourselves, you know what, like, I don't want to be a gang member. I just want to write on walls and be a graffiti artist. But it came to a point that they were pushing pretty hard. And some of us decided that, you know what, let's start this gang to protect ourselves, you know, and to make it that we don't want to join their gang. So let's just make this little group of friends to protect ourselves. And then from one day to another, we started having beef, and then another beef, and then the gangs around us didn't like it. And then so I had to choose, basically, and my best friend, Jez Bird, rest in peace, he basically said, you know what, if you wrote the neighborhood as much as you write Drew, we'd be up everywhere. So at that time, what I would do is I'd have the blue for the Drew, and then I would have the black for the neighborhood. And that's when it kind of like went into another level. And this is when I finally transitioned from like, and it happened because one of my best friends, which was my friend Jez, he got killed, he got murdered. And when he got murdered, that was it. This became real. And then those that basically said, you know what, I'm in it 100%. And some people were like, this is not what I signed up for. And they stepped away. But I went in full throttle. And I think of when I look back and I start saying to myself, why did I go full throttle? And I think it goes back to, like, a lot of times, like, the influence that I had basically growing up with my dad, always making me a leader and basically teaching me to stand on my own 2 feet. And when I stopped getting those kudos and those recognition that he was proud of me, and that what I was doing was good, that I just decided, you know what, F this. And it was more of an emotional thing for me when I started with graffiti too. I think I wanted an outlet. Like most people, I think we all try to get some kind of recognition or some kind of love or some type of like, I'm proud of you. And I wasn't getting that, whether it was at school, but I got it when I was painting on the walls and I was tagging and I was doing that because other writers would be like, damn, I saw you up, fool. Like, that shit was dope. I saw you on the rooftop. I saw you on this. And if it made you have that sense of like belonging. And since my dad was such a hard worker and growing up in that structure where like, I don't hug, kiss, I love you, like that was in his vocabulary because of tradition and it's passed down from generation to generation. And I wanted a sense of belonging. So when that became that, and I started doing that, and then when I lose somebody from my life, the emptiness was even more to the point that I just said, you know what, I'm doing this, and I'm doing it like nothing. I basically like everything that I do is not half-ass. So when I got involved, I jumped in with both feet, put the blue can down, and I just started writing with the black can. And then that's when my history of like juvenile hall, prison came in.
Yeah. So you went through many dark ages after that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then it even led into drug addiction.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And like anything, you know what? I was trying to fill this emptiness. You know, just because you're doing graph or you're doing writing on walls and you find this sense of euphoria that you basically are seeking, you still have this sense of like emptiness within you. And I was introduced at an early age, about 14 years old, smoking weed, drinking 40s and stuff like that. And then it just basically kept on going. It continued my drug addiction, and then it became to a point that I needed to drink or get high to basically function later on in life. But in the beginning, it was just like me drinking or getting high to have fun, to enjoy the realms of just graffiti or tagging or whatever it was. But yeah, my addiction came hard.
Yeah. I just want to tell a little story of how I witnessed it. And I've told you this one before, is that, I always saw you up and I never met you, but you were, influential. I thought you were fresh. I loved how you did your tagging up high and all that stuff. Then I saw you disappear for a while. And I never, I was like, oh man, I never got to meet him, whatever. And then one day I'm painting in the MacArthur Park tunnels. There was an opening where we were able to legally paint inside of the tunnels and do pieces. And while we were painting them, a big cholo walks up to me with a white T-shirt and baggy shorts and stuff like that. Like, what's up, man? What what you write, whatever? And I'm like, yeah, I'm skilled, whatever. And you're, oh, I used to do that, man. I'm Drew. And I'm like, oh, good to meet you, man. Like you're a legend and stuff like that. And you're like, yeah, man. No, but right now, I remember you were on a mission because that park was shady, man, and that's where a lot of drugs were being sold.
Mhm.
And that's where people would go to score. And I saw you had those bugged out eyes, like I need something. And you had a giant screwdriver, and you pulled it out. You said, "I'm about to go get some money real quick. Excuse me, I gotta go, man." And you walked away, man. And to that day, I was like, man, I hope I, get to see him again. I hope that, because it almost felt like I might have just seen Drew for the last time. Like, who knows
Mhm.
what he's gonna get into because of this.
Yeah, most definitely.
And so that's why we'll talk about it later. But that's why I was so overjoyed when later on in life I got to see you still now whole and alive and all that.
Mhm.
So yeah, so just that was a little
You know what?
story just of what I saw.
Even as a juvenile and just getting in both feet, and just going for it, like this was my life because the people around me and the family that I had, as far as my dad was basically like even told me, and that's a story too. But just my influences in my life would be like, you're gonna be dead before you turn 18, and everybody around me, counselors to police officers to anybody that I encountered that was supposedly supposed to be a positive influence in my life, they would be like, you know what, you're just on borrowed time, young man. You're gonna die like the rest of your homeboys. And so in my mind, I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to leave a legacy. I want people to remember this name by him being like this down ass fool, like that was crazy and just about the business. And in reality, I all I was gonna leave was a monument, that said, "Here lays Drew," basically. But at that time, you're so like stuck on your world, and you're like, "This is what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna basically not make it till I'm 18. So let me just go in full throttle."
Yeah.
And constantly just getting, by the time I was already 18 years old, I was already stabbed 11 times. I was already shot twice. There was certain things that were happening in my life that were telling me that you're going to die. And I wasn't afraid of dying. I wasn't afraid. It was because it was the thing that was happening in that time in the late 80s, early 90s. Like everybody was getting killed, and it was just a cycle of violence. It
Yeah,
was
and you
constantly.
were committed 100%.
Yeah, you were committed, and you know what? If it happened, it happened. And with the drug use coming along with it, you were basically on a path of suicide.
Yeah.
Just to basically, if it happens, so be it. You know what? I want people to remember me.
Yeah.
And that's why I have this phrase that I believe is like prison saved my life. Because after that, shortly after, it was county jail. And I remember even being 17 years old, and I didn't have any older homies to influence me and guide me in anything. So they told me, like, "You're so tall and big, like you should just say you're 18 and go to county jail. And that way you'll just get out that next day." And I remember getting caught up with some shit. And then I said I was 18, and I went to the county jail for the first time. And that was with some grown ass men, you know, and it was a whole nother world in there. And I got out, went to the glass house from there, went to the county jail, 9500, went up there, ran around. And at first I was like anyone, like you're just like, wow, where am I at? And then you get adapted to it, and you're just like, shh, this ain't nothing. You know what I mean? Just don't let nobody press up on you, try to get crazy with you. And the rest is just take flight. And I adapted to it. I basically became like okay with it.
And for all of our viewers, just to give you an idea of what he's talking about, in the county jail, there were different levels of floors. There was like the 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, the thousands, right? And then 9,500, where he's talking about, was probably one of the first ones that you'll go to that had like these rooms. It was like a level that had 2 or 3 maybe rooms, dorms, right? With like double bunk beds and like 150 of them packed in. Double bunks. So that means that you had about 300, 400 guys in one room. And it was essentially like little villages, like, like you'd have like different nationalities and races congregating in different areas. And so there were politics. And because it was like a transitional kind of a thing, people were still going to court. Some people were coming in. Some people had been there for a long time. Some guys coming from prison. It was a really, really volatile environment, and there was robberies and fighting and everything.
If you survive 9,500, you could survive any prison in those days.
In those days,
and
it was
the thing is that when you first walked in, you basically were greeted or knew already what area to go to, because every area was designated for their own race. And then you would just go and check in, and then, okay, it's all good. This is your bunk, and during count, move bunks till they do the count, do all that shit. But it was, if you came in with nice shoes and you were soft and you were a weenie, you were getting your shit taken. If you had any money on you, you were getting your shit taken. You know what I mean? It was a rough time.
And there was tobacco and cigarettes back then.
Yeah, there was
money bags.
There was money bags,
little bags where you'd actually had cash. So
wet
you
40
could imagine
all day. Yeah, wet 40,
and your own tennis shoes you can have. So you can imagine guys that walked in there with nice tennis shoes, or guys that had money. If they weren't careful, man, they weren't down for it, you were getting took sure.
If you showed any sign of weakness at all, whether you were a homie or you were not, and you showed any sign of weakness at all, or you were just with that,
it was predatory,
that funny business, you were getting your shit taken.
Yeah,
you had to stand up. And I was only 17 when I first encountered that, and it was crazy. It was crazy, and I wasn't afraid after that. I felt like, okay, I'm adapted to this. I'm already immune to this. Bring it on. And I wasn't afraid when they sat me down and they told me you're going to jail. It was like, go ahead, put me in jail. I have a history story all the way back to like when I was 9 years old. And I think that's where my first time that I was ever institutionalized is that I basically my mom called the cops on me. I got handcuffed, and she tried to play that scared straight shit on me to show me a lesson. And that's when it first started for me that jail was nothing. You know what I mean? At first, of course, you walk in there and you're closed in juvenile hall, Eastlake, and you're crying your eyes out. You know what I mean? You're scared as hell. But then then you walk out of that cell door and you're like, okay, this is what jail is. And then you're just like adapted to it. You're functioning. Now you just know what you got to do. And you get out and then you continue doing it. And it's not something that they're putting over your head no more. They're saying, well, if you act bad, we'll put you in jail. So what? Some people live better in jail than out here. So it wasn't a fear factor for me no more. And it was like, all right, well, do it. Do what you got to do.
By the grace of God, eventually you got past those dark days. You survived by grace, and that's the shirt you designed. Thank you for this gift. It says "Amazing Grace."
You're very welcome.
And that's when both we've related to all this before. How we just don't understand why, so much goodness has been shown to us. And we're grateful for it. And so, over time, that goodness worked in your life, and years later, you come back around, and now you start working you turn your life around. You become a counselor for drug rehabs. You came back into the graffiti community, but you became like a unifying factor. You like the RTDK crew. You help bring that back together and have events and help kind of bring that whole culture, in a more positive way and bringing it together. Like the alumni from those days, and so you created like a little fraternity or helped, encourage that and organize it. When people passed away and stuff, you'd organize like funerals and help work with the parents, like for test, rest in peace, memorial events, search, and all. You're always involved in helping, and became like a pillar in the graph community of just creating a sense of like goodwill for each other and bringing people together. And,
most definitely. And
all that. So I just want to say, I was just really, really happy to see you when you came back around. You were looking better, sounding good, and I that just, what that did is that, because the last memory I had of you was in the park with the big screwdriver.
Yeah.
Thinking this guy, just like the cops and everyone else used to tell, your counselors said that he's too far gone. That's what I thought. And now I'm seeing you like you made it out, man. And I was just thankful. I remember that. And I was happy for you, bro. I was really happy.
What? It wasn't an overnight thing. I had to go to prison. And eventually I ended up going to prison in 1991. And it was a stretch. You know what I mean? I think I needed a stretch because the little 2 years, 3 years, 16 months, that was just a joke. You know what I mean? I'll take you back to the first time I went to prison. And I still have that gangbang graffiti memory. And basically, I didn't know prison. So I'm in prison. They sent me to Chino, and they sent me to the 1 yard because I took a deal for 16 months because I wanted to get out of the county jail because my homies just... So I was catching the blues in there. The sheriffs would come in knocking on my door, taking me out every day. I was getting beat up every day. I was like, you know what? A year lid in the county or 16 months? I said, I'll take 16 months all day. Bring it on, So that's my first encounter when it was in 1987 when I went to prison. And they sent me to Chino, and I'm there. I have no knowledge because I didn't grow up with any older homies. Like, nobody schooled me and gave me any wisdom or taught me the ropes like there is now. Like, you have different neighborhoods and different crews that basically have older peers and older people that basically influence you and teach you.
Yeah, well, they lace up people to prepare them if there's something happens.
For whatever it is that you're going to encounter. I didn't have that. I was one of the older guys that basically was living that lifestyle. So I go to Chino and I'm there. A couple of weeks I'm walking around and I find a spray can. And when I find the spray can, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go do a block letter, right? So I remember... walking onto the yard, and there was this big, huge warehouse industry kind of like wall, and here I am doing a big ass block letter.
Be kidding me,
in prison. You know what I mean?
You got to be kidding
me. And I'm
me.
gone. The place gets locked down. You know what I mean? They're looking for this guy who basically...
What did you write? Gang stuff or graffiti?
It was gang affiliated, associated stuff.
Gosh.
Big ass, huge block letters.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like 7 feet tall, like by 30 feet wide.
You worked that can till it was empty.
It never went away. You know what I mean? And the next day, morning comes, I guess the CEOs and whoever finds out this big old huge block letter is on this prison yard. So they shut the whole yard down, and they're looking around. And then you have the older homies; they already know who you are, so they're like, "Hey, come over here, fool! Like, what is your problem? You know what I mean? Like, you're fucking bombing all over the fucking prison. Like, are you okay?" I'm like, "Bro, like, I found a can. I wrote. Well, you know what? Here, check it out. This is what you're gonna do. You're gonna fucking do 1,000 fucking burpees, and that's it. You know what I mean?" I was like, "All right, fuck it." Took me forever to do them, but I was in good shape. I was in health, and it was like whatever. But I did what I had to do, and that was it. But that was one of the main experiences that I had, which was crazy. Is that one of the things that they teach us and they tell us when we're growing up is that wherever you see your tag, you'll come back and
Yeah, I've
see
heard
it, right?
that
So
legend.
I was also involved in the old school uh, program that was called Scare Straight because they figured out like this guy is a lost case. He's already too far fetched to help, and then Scare Straight comes out. They take me on a bus, bunch of little gangbanger taggers. We all end up. My goal is I didn't care what these old people were going to tell me. All I care about is if I have this little pencil in the back of my ear that I could be able to go in there and I could
Get up
tag
everywhere.
inside the prison, right? So fast forward, basically like 5 years later, here I am in this same prison that I went and walked into to hear these grown ass men tell me that if I don't change, I'm going to die and I need to get my life together. I'm back in that institution and I see my tag. So I'm like, what the fuck?
The
This
legend
is
came
true.
true. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then here I am also doing a big ass block. And then it was just part of my format, part of my like, this is just part of my life. Tagging was always, and for most of us, we know what I'm talking about. Like, we always had to have a pen and paper, always had to have something writing this and that. We constantly have to have like a marker in our pocket or some type of utensil that we could write with. And yeah, and then
So you always had that urge to express yourself,
Mhm.
to create something, but just it came out in different ways,
Yeah.
But now it's really cool to watch how it's coming out now. And can
And
we
that's
talk
where
about
like,
that now?
yeah, well, I think more than anything is where it started because when in '91 when I got incarcerated, I had this long stretch ahead of me. It started in prison. You know what I mean? I went in for the wrong reasons because I got stuck and pulled into a program that was called SAP. And I was fighting and killing myself. And I was like, no freaking way I'm going to this program, this SAP program, this drug program. I'm not going there. But I already had 11 years in. And I was like, all right, I'll go in. So I'm here interviewing with this one woman there. And I'm like, damn, she's kind of hot, And she's flirting with me. And I'm like, I could probably, make something of this. I was single, And I'm in there and I'm like, all right, fuck it. Put me in the SAP program. And then me sitting there and just like there's an old saying in this, basically it goes in one ear and out the other. And if you hear it long enough, you're gonna get it. And fake it till you make it. There's all these different sayings that people tell you, and you're listening to them, and you're like, this ain't for me. I'm not going out to this kind of world.
So you're
And
not buying it.
no, I wasn't buying it, but I was there and I started listening to the things that people were telling me. Like, every time you go to jail, you're under the influence of drugs. How many times have you hurt your family? How many times have you done this? How many times have you done this? You're a thief. And I was like, what? I'm not a thief. You're crazy. Like, I rob fools. They go, yeah, you're a thief because every time that your parents don't sleep, you steal their freedom, you steal their time, you steal basically their sleep.
So they're hitting you with true concepts that
They're
you
hitting me
couldn't
with
fight.
shit. Yeah, and I was like, damn, this is true. You know what I mean? Like, to the point that my house was shot up so many times. My dad slept on the floor behind a bed, and it was just chaos. You know what I mean? And when I found out later on, it wasn't just the addiction of drugs. I was addicted to chaos. That was my goal. Like, for me, is like, I'd instigate. I pump people up. I basically started getting in people's heads, like trying to manipulate them to do what we wanted to do. And during that process of me going in the program, I started listening. I started thinking and saying to myself, you know what? Damn, this is kind of right. Like, there is an emptiness in me. And then I found basically the strength to basically say, you know what? I'll become a mentor, And I did it for the wrong reasons. 100%. I got into this field back then because then eventually we were having a little thing going on, me and her, and she was bringing me burritos and she
Yeah.
still would bring me dope. You know what I mean? She would bring me dope inside the prison, and I was like, what the fuck? And I make money. But eventually it came to a point that I had to do something. You know what I mean? I paroled in 2004, and just the resources and stuff. And I think even before that, how it really opened my eyes was there was a program that was basically, it was called From the Inside Out. And I went for the wrong reasons too. My homie was on another yard. We meet up together. We'd be able to exchange numbers, drugs, the whole cha-cha. And I remember signing up, and I went in, and I'm sitting at a table, and then some youngsters come in, and they're just looking at me, and they're just like, where you from? And I'm like, what? Where you from? I'm banging back at them. And I'm supposed to be a grown-ass man, already 10 years in prison, and not supposed to have that mindset. But I realized one thing is that the brokenness and the emptiness that they had was the same shit I went through. And I sat there and I talked to these young kids and these young adults, and I liked and enjoyed that program. I was like, wow, man, you know what? This is probably why I'm alive today. You know what I mean? To give back. And that's where it started the process for me, of me like saying to myself, you know what?
It was like old you seeing the
that was
young
me.
you. Yeah, seeing the young you, and now you had a chance to I could go back and fix some things about myself.
That was me.
In helping them.
Wishing that I could have somebody to basically shake me and say, you know what, without them shaking me to a point that you're going to die and you're worthless, you're a scumbag, like you're this, that, and all that. There was the ridicule that basically, that tough love shit that people play on the roles of our young kids' lives. Instead of doing that, just give them a hug, tell them you love them, And I never got that because, and like I said earlier, it's not that it wasn't given to me, because it was just a different mindset from my dad. Put a roof over your head, make sure he has shoes, feed him.
That was his way of showing you love.
That's what a dad does, But the hugging and kissing and I love you, that's not going to happen. And that's what I believe a lot of us want, is that I love you, I'm proud of you, whatever it was. So being in that program, and I finally get out in 2004, and right away, what I want to do is I say to myself, I'm going to go to college, because there's so many different benefits that could come from you being incarcerated. Felons and people that have been in trouble before have so many opportunities, more than people that have never been in trouble in their life.
Wow.
So I go and enroll in college. I'm chilling. And my homie Price, rest in peace, he reaches out to me. We're having a barbecue. And I'm like, bro, I'm a high risk. Like, I can't be around, like, nobody. And he's like, no, Trip, it's FEMA. We have a kickback. Everybody's going to be there. You're going to see a bunch of old friends and this, that, and all that. I'm like, bro, I'm not even on that mindset. Like, I just want to chill. You know what I mean? And I go to the barbecue and I see all the OTRs and a bunch of LODs. And I'm just like, wow. You know what I mean?
All your old friends from school.
Everybody that I grew up with. And
they didn't go the same path. So it was like a whole different thing.
And then from there, you're just like, wow. You know what I mean? And it's like anything, all I wanted to do is just write on walls, goes back into my head. And that's because, like, for me, that's how it all started. You know what I mean? Like, I just wanted to be a graffiti writer, but just the circumstances and the environment that I grew up in was pushing me against the wall and telling me, and basically making me into this person that I became.
Yeah.
And it's crazy too when you go back to, like, when I was doing in the county fighting my case for all those years, like, so many old graffiti writers who come in, and it was during that time when the all taggers had a green light. So I'm in there gang banged out, and I'm on like another.
Hold on. Just for the viewers that don't know any about this, there was a time when, like, the gangs in the jail system called it a green light, meaning that what they were doing, putting pressure on graffiti crews to join their gangs, to recruit them. And if they didn't, anyone who wasn't part of a gang would automatically be like...
boop-bopped.
Yeah, they'd get beat up if they went to jail and they were claiming graffiti crews and not a gang.
And that's where, like, the resident kicked in. Like, are you a Southsider, or are you a resident, or are you a homie? And that's where that all came in, which was basically the one question that if you're ready for it, is what's going to happen when you go to jail. Like, that's one of the questions they're going to ask you when you first get there. Are you a homie, or are you a resident? And from a homie, you become a Southsider, and resident, you're part of under the umbrella of being a Southsider. So those are questions that are asked the moment you walk through that door. And there's no switching up. There's no changing up. There's no, let me think about it. it's right then and there the toughest decision you have to make in your life. And being a gang member, you automatically become,
It's baked into
yeah,
the
it's already there. It's all
yeah.
part of it. So getting out, I go to this barbecue and I'm chilling, and I just fell in love with it again. You know, this little boy, this young man that loved this and was so involved in this lifestyle of graffiti and the fun that came with it, because it was so much fun. It was, you know, a bunch of us, just 30, 40 of us, always every day mobbing, just tagging, having fun, racking, doing the whole cha-cha with all that, and just enjoying life on life's terms, basically by destroying people's property and just bombing on buses. But it gave us a sense of belonging. And then I reached back and I found that as an adult. And I went to this thing and I fell in love once again with graffiti. And a lot of people that say like you were gone for a long time. Yeah, I was. You know what I mean? I think that I needed to find myself through that time period in my life where I was institutionalized and I was going through my trials and tribulations to be the person that I am today. And that's where we're at right now with that question, is like I had to get out and use my past to be the person that I am today.
And you know what? This is not something that is you're not the only one, because there is a lot of guys who started out in the early days and they went on, whether it was many different directions, and they were just away from graffiti art and expression. But as older people, maybe even some of them after they raised families, have come back around because, but learning to do it not in the old way, not going bombing like they used to, but still making kind of a community where they, you know, whether it's through stickers, black books, painting, legal, you know, now as older people, you figure out ways that you can kind of get some of that vibe and that cool attention, like you said, that we could give each other, and recognition. They say a human need is to recognize one another. And, you know, everybody has a need to be recognized or to be loved. And there's a lot of love within people that can relate from the, hey, we used to do that as kids. It was fun. And even though now we can't do it the same way or won't do it, we still can get that feeling of love and recognition, you know what I mean? And still do creative things. And which brings me into the next thing I want to talk with you about, because I think you've done a fantastic job of that.
Thank you.
First, when you got into stickers, you got in early, like with Search and all. You guys were that first wave of LA guys that was really pushing stickers. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Okay.
Well, the one person that introduced me and got me involved in stickers was when after shortly of me getting out, about a year after, I started like just dipping and dabbing, not into the stickers, because we grew up in a different generation. And if you put a sticker on a bus or something like that, that wasn't graffiti. You know what I mean? We looked at it different. And graffiti was when you tagged your name with the marker, some type of utensil that basically left a mark on the wall or on a
Surface,
bus or
yeah.
whatever, some type of surface. So when I met Serge for the first time, it was in 2005. And it happened to be that I was at the Graph Lab. And when I was at the Graph Lab, he walked up to me and he's like, "Oh shit, you're Drew?" And I was like, "Yeah." And, you know, I never knew what this name and what basically, I never carried it to like, oh yeah, like I did this back in the days. Like I'm that guy. Like I don't carry myself like that. I shit like everybody else. I go to the bathroom every day and I'm a human being first and foremost. I just try to be a good person. That's my number one goal. As far as how many years and how long and these titles that they put on me, I'm not that guy. All right. But he's like, "Oh man, yeah, we heard of you. I know you and I've seen you up." And he's like, "Here, man, sign my black book." Because that's the first thing he does. You know what I mean? Is pull out his black book and he signs it. And I sign away on his black book. And he's like, "Man, you're dope." And that was that. My first encounter. And then he's like, "Here's a bunch of stickers." And then I'm like, "Okay." And then he tells me, you know, like, you can make your own. You know, you just spray out whatever. You go to any store or something like that. You spray out whatever they have on there and you tag your name on it. So that's how it started for me. You know, just going to a local store where they would give away a sticker and spray paint it black and then tag my name with the marker, whether it was a uni paint marker or whatever it was. And then from there, it started evolving to the point that, you know what, the sticker game for me is like, I amaze myself sometimes because of the iconic collaborations I've done. You know, I've done collaborations with Scheme. I've done collaborations with Cap. I've done collaborations with just
All kinds of people.
so many types of
MQ
people.
was a big one that you
MQ, to just
Yeah.
robots will kill
Yeah.
to just so many different people like that I would never ever like every time like I can't believe I did a collab with Cap, the guy that and then with
The guys
Scheme.
that you saw in Subway
Yeah,
Art when
the
you were a
people,
kid.
just people that were like, what? And they reach out to me and they want to do a collab with me, or I reach out to them, vice versa. And it's just like amazing to see that they respect me as much as I respect them. Because for me, it's very simple. When I do a collaboration with somebody, it's kind of like, am I going to let you in my cell in prison? You know what I mean? Because your beef becomes my beef. So if you act like a jerk and you're mean and treat people wrong, I don't want to be on that sticker with you.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Like you have to have a good character. You have to be a good person for me to basically validate that I want to be on that sticker with you. That's my first and foremost.
That's a key thing.
And then to me, it doesn't matter if you have one follower or 100,000 followers.
Yeah.
If you're a good person,
Yeah.
you're solid, and you basically don't treat people like shit, and don't keep your not very cocky and think that you're the shit,
Yeah.
then I'll do a collaboration with you. But if you're like arrogant and you're just like troublemaker,
Yeah.
I don't want nothing to do with you because I inherit your beef.
Yeah, you don't want to associate
Yeah,
your
and
name
I don't
with
want to
that,
associate. And
that
I've had this
behavior.
happen
Yeah.
with different people that have basically came at me and say, "Let's do a collab," and I choose not to, because of the walk of life that I choose to live.
Yeah.
And it's basically with somebody that wants me to do a collaboration with a medicinal marijuana place or something to do with some drugs involved in this collaboration. I have to keep my values.
Yeah.
And my integrity means more to me than any dollar. So for me, it's like when you have a good value and you have a good character, then I'm willing to do that collab with you. And like I said, I don't care if you have 1 million followers or 10 followers, as long as you have a good character.
That's awesome. Now, so from the stickers, what was cool is that you learned. It's like you almost like you found your artistic calling, which is to make interesting designs. That you have so many different designs that you come up with, so many interesting concepts and graphics, and so you're coming out with shirts, coming out with hats, coming out with all kinds of cool products. And you've kind of made like a whole brand, but it's really a lot of variety in there.
Well, I take it back to like what I would wear. That's first and foremost. For me, it's not like, and not only what I would wear, but the quality of what I would wear. Like I'm not gonna sell you some bunk bullshit clothes that I wouldn't wear. Like I have to look at it like that. Like for me, it's kind of like, what would my generation want to see, or what would they wear? Second of all is the quality of it, and also have a history behind it, targeting just graffiti writers or people that basically are lost and confused that need some type of like a motivational speech or a motivational wording that basically could help them throughout that day.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then through your art now, you've traveled a lot. Can you talk about some of your events and places you've traveled to paint and
Yeah, one
do
of the things
stickers?
that me growing up, not the greatest graffiti writer in the world, I've been offered and I had opportunities to basically go to different states within the United States and be a judge for a few shows, and then given the opportunity to basically travel to other countries, and paint. And that right there is amazing because like anything, like we're so confined in our little world that we don't step out of it. But for now to basically travel and basically go to other countries and just see basically and empathize and look at it and say, man, like we thought we had it bad. And you see these poor poverty countries and you're like, wow.
Like you went to Colombia
I
recently,
went to
right?
Colombia, I went to Philippines, I've been to Korea. I'm on my way next couple months. I would be in Australia. So there's just different
Yeah,
things and
yeah.
opportunities that being sober and living a good life will give you, And I'm fortunate enough to have a amazing wife and kids that basically support me and are like behind me 100%, that be like, yeah, babe, you because I don't care what anybody says, you have to ask permission. You know what I mean? If you're in a relationship, you're married, then it's not about just, I'm just going to go and I'm going to do what I want to do. No, it's more to it than that. And my wife supports me 100%. She knows that I'm not going to be out there screwing some chicks and doing some bullshit. You know what I mean? I'm out there for the right reason. I'm out there, and anybody that I try to communicate with, I try to like give them a sense of like hope, or try to belong, or let them know that they're unique and special in their own way. Like that's what I try to carry with myself now, because I've done so much damage and dirt and harm to so many lives and families in the past that it's only right for me to do this. And that's where I'm at today.
Awesome, bro. Well, any last words of wisdom for young writers, or anything just you'd like to just share?
One of the things that I do want to share is that I understand that there's certain people in certain areas that we all want to reach, and there's gatekeepers for that, you know. And sometimes we see these flyers and we see these shows and we see these galleries, and they're just the same people always. And it's not a matter of, like one kid told me one time, he goes, the only way I'm going to ever get to your level is when you die. And that hit me hard. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, because you and your generation are in all the shows, and we're trying to make it to get there, but the gatekeepers don't allow us to. So my thing is like to allow those people that are out there and they have those platforms, not to basically give opportunity to the younger generation to be inspired, to like basically say, you know what, we're going to pull you with us. And a lot of times we close those doors on a lot of these younger generations, and we're just so invested in us that we don't look down to where we started.
Right.
You know, and that's why this platform that we're having here, it's not to show, I believe, that, oh, look at the legends. No, it's more of like, okay, we made it out of that. We were in the gutter with you, and we're at where we're at with hard work, determination, and basically putting the work in.
It takes consistency and it takes time. Like I believe that work itself will reward you, and it doesn't always happen instantly. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's slower. But if you put in the work and the time, and you know, in whatever you craft or work you do, it will have its payoff. You know,
Most definitely.
It's like a universal thing. You're putting the work out there. The rewards will reap at some point.
Most definitely.
Goals can be accomplished if you put your mind to it. But you know, that's the thing. It's just the difference between looking at it as like a longer term goal or just a quick. If you're in it for something quick, you might not get it.
No.
Quick, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like they just want it fast. You know what I mean? It just takes time. It takes time, and it takes, you know, the tenacity to basically to want it and put in the work, and eventually you'll make it. And when you do make it, just reach down and pull somebody else up. And that's, I think, our responsibility as elders is to basically influence these younger generations of writers, because we all started off as toys. And to some people, I'm still a toy. You know what I mean? But the reality of it is that if I could put something in your head that'll motivate you or that get you off of drugs or alcohol, then that's my responsibility. And that's where I'm at today, is to basically give you insight that you deserve better.
Okay, with that being said, and thank you for that, you've, you know, because of the sensitivity of your work, you have clients and certain like ethical things that you have to, you know, confidentiality and all that. So you wear your mask when you're doing public appearances, so as not to compromise your job. But,
well, you know what? Today,
can we get a peek?
I'm gonna basically, you know what? Because I respect the viewers that are watching this, and I finally came to a term that basically it's time to reveal the man under the mask. So here he is.
Okay, you guys, can we get a zoom in? Can we get a countdown? 10, 9. Got you.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, brother.
Because time is our most precious resource. Always remember that every minute, every second, and every moment matters. So let's do our best to live a kind, compassionate, and loving life. And God willing, we'll see you in the next episode. 1.
Monstro, Rocka, Dali. The natives are restless. Yeah, I say the natives are restless. The natives are restless. Rocka, Irish science. Let's go, let's go.
Yo, let's gather here a second, take in the atmosphere. As I steer this vessel like a Chevrolet Cavalier, I'm a native to this culture, chasing vultures up out of here. Fuck out of here, a lot of work put in like Vladimir. We dismissing fear. Listen here, if your loyalty shifts over clout to the point where you disappeared and disappear, you overlooked those who wrote the book. How does that work? How you a factor when there's gaps in your chapters? Let's cancel the chatter off the grid, damage your scanner, shed some light in this tavern, and hold this mic just like a lantern. I don't settle for the standard or nestle in the pasture, turn a happy camper into a snack for a pack of panthers. My pops would often reminisce on the mothership landing, and then become sad in it how the brothers disbanded over money mismanaged and traditions abandoned.